Good morning. I am Sachin Patwardhan from Department of Chemical Engineering in IIT Bombay, and today through 3 lectures I am going to talk about how I teach advanced numerical analysis, mainly in our department but also to postgraduate students. Now, numerical analysis is a very important area of applied mathematics, particularly relevant for engineers because we have to solve a wide class of problems. Before I talk about my introductory lectures, let me tell you that I have a NPTEL web and video course available at website nptel /ac.ac.in. This consists of video lectures, which is about 49 lectures on different subtopics of numerical analysis, and there are also detailed lecture notes. So, the target audience for this course is not first, second, third year. The target audience for this course is first year postgraduate students and senior undergraduate students. So, those who are actually been exposed to engineering problems already for 3 to 4 years, and now they want to take on some projects or let us say their postgraduate work and so on. So, that is where I am targeting this course. My second target audience, well, which is not stated in this, is reaching teachers who have been teaching mathematics in. Now, one thing that which we have been doing at IIT Bombay in many departments is to teach mathematics within the department. So, particularly for postgraduates, also some senior undergraduate courses. So, many of us have been trying this for many years, many departments have been trying this for many years. The reason being that the courses that involve mixture of engineering and mathematics are probably introduced with more context by engineers. So, if we as engineers teach these courses, then we can actually mix the context of the problem solving in the particular domain with the tools or techniques that are to be taught to the students, and teaching it in the context of problem solving makes it more potent in terms of so it's about so these lectures are not going to be about details of, because if you are interested in details, you can visit the NPTEL website and you can look at a particular set of lectures or particular topics, subtopics. I want to give an overview as to how I do it, how I organize the course, and what is difference. So, maybe if you are teaching a similar course for your undergraduate students, then you may not follow exact the line of topics covered, but you may want to learn it yourself so that you can teach an undergraduate course better. So, this will help you in 2 ways. One is teaching your postgraduate students, and the other is even as a background foundation for undergraduate course. Okay, so why do we need first of all, why do we need these numerical methods or numerical analysis? Well, modern engineering systems, they consist of wide variety of interconnected units, and then you need to analyze, you need to understand them to be able to operate them efficiently. So be it an electronic system, be it a chemical system, mechanical system, aerospace systems. In fact, it's very difficult to, if you take a complex system like aircraft, it's difficult to say which is mechanical, which is chemical, which is electrical, which is electronics. It's all, the real systems are not divided into branches. The real systems are many times very complex. You take we take, let's say, some electronic device. It's also important that you have efficient heat transfer so that the temperature inside is maintained. So, and heat transfer would be a problem of a mechanical engineering or a chemical engineering student. So it's very hard to segregate, and so even though we have branches for the undergraduate convenience of teaching undergraduate education, so real systems are really complex, and operating such systems or designing such systems is a very complex and challenging problem. Mathematical modeling and simulation is a very cost effective way of going about analyzing behavior of the systems, and this is where actually the numerical analysis comes into picture. Oftentimes the real systems, if you look at the engineering mathematics that we teach, majority of the engineering mathematics we teach has, I would say, has analytical solutions. We try to focus more on solving differential equations analytically, solving partial differential equations analytically, solving linear algebraic equations analytically, and so on. Now it has its own value, of course. Teaching analytical tools have a lot of value, but at the same time, particularly if you look at the real problems that an engineer encounters, and the amount of emphasis that we give on analytical tools, I think there is some kind of a mismatch, in the sense that most of the real problems are not do not have analytical solutions. Okay, they are not nicely formed problems. Many times analytical solutions exist from very nicely formed idealized problems which do not exist in reality, which are not what you really see. For example, if you are doing a circuit simulation, you might assume that the temperature remains constant, so the resistance remains constant, but it may not remain constant in reality, and then you may, if you want to really simulate a device in its to evaluate its true performance on a shop floor, you may have to consider temperature effects, you may have to let go some of the idealizations that you make. So, and moment you do that, moment you say that, well, my resistance in my circuit or a capacitance in my circuit or whatever, the elements are functions of temperature, the level of models becomes significantly complex. Okay, and then the only method that you can deal with this complex problems is to use numerical tools. I do not think we have analytical solutions for most of these real problems. Okay, so typically in an engineering course we have one we may have one what I would say, one elective course, or we may have a compulsory course on numerical analysis, which is not given the due importance, but in the present context, when computing and simulation has become important, it's extremely important to teach this course very well to the students. So I would just like to point out to the last statement that I have made here, that best approach to solving design or operation problems, optimal design or optimal operation problems, are a judicious combination of mathematical modeling and carefully planned experiments. I will just give you an example, and as I said, let's discuss, let's talk about things as we go along. I would like to be more in the discussion mode than one way dialogue, that I am just one way monologue. So it should be a dialogue. I will give you an example, well, not exactly in the well, it is electrical domain, power electronics. I have a student, jointly guided PhD student, who is working in electrical department in power electronics lab, and we are working on control of DC to DC converters. Okay, so this is now I am a control engineer. Well, even though I am faculty in chemical engineering department, my area of research is control engineering or control algorithms. And what we have been doing very extensively is we have of course an experimental setup of DC to DC converter. We control it using FPGA and some DSpace card and so on. But before we actually go and conduct experiments, okay, we do extensive simulations in MATLAB. Okay, so the numerical simulation of this DC to DC converter is a integral part of our exercise when we do experiments. So what we do is we have a reasonably faithful model of the DC to DC converter that we are looking at, and instead of conducting large number of experiments on the real system, we actually zero down on the experiments to be conducted using simulation studies. Okay, so we actually simulate the control loop, the converter, the control loop, typical disturbances that can affect the system, the ranges in which you want to operate, with full nonlinearity, everything thrown in. So it is not a linear transfer function model, it is a nonlinear simulator. Of course, now MATLAB gives you good toolboxes for simulating power systems, power electronic systems. So the point I want to make here is that instead of doing large number of experiments, we first do numerical simulations, and let us say after zeroing down through numerical simulations, so the numerical simulations are of two layers. First layer we do is using linear transfer function models. So the reason being that linear transfer function models, you can do a lot of analysis, but those are very preliminary results that you get through transfer function models, very idealized results. The real system does not behave like that. So we have a simulator for the DC to DC converter, which is with the nonlinear effects, with saturation nonlinearity, with all kinds of the real effects thrown in, and then this simulator is then used as a plant on which we perform the control experiments. Then we do the tuning of the controller using this nonlinear simulation. Then we actually come up with a shortlisted set of experiments that we want to conduct, and then we conduct those experiments. So actually it saves a lot of effort on doing experiments. Of course, in this particular domain, conducting experiments does not take too much time. One experiment is probably a few seconds, but in other engineering domains, let us say chemical engineering or mechanical engineering, conducting experiments might be time consuming. It could take 1 or 2 days, it could be very costly affair, you have to use some chemicals and so on. So instead of doing experiments, instead of directly jumping to doing experiments, one could use a judicious combination of simulations using numerical solutions of the models that you develop, and then plan the experiments. So that is the so mathematical models, they are at the heart of problem solving exercise, and this is very, very important. These models provide insight into the long term as well as short term behavior of the process. So when I mean to say long term, we typically look at we typically ignore the transients and do a design. When I mean transient, for example, in context of some electrical systems, it might meet frequency response. You ignore the initial transients and look at only frequency domain analysis, or you might be looking at the steady state DC behavior to design the system. When it comes to operation, we need to understand the dynamics, and this is where so the word process systems is generic. It's any system that you are not necessarily chemical engineering or mechanical engineering, or any process as in any system. If you ask me which models are good for using in simulation, of course the models that come from physics, that come from mechanistic, phenomenological, or first principles. Different words are used in different domains. We also use a combination of, let's say, correlations many times. For example, you want to consider temperature effects in a circuit with of a resistance. You may use a correlation for temperature with resistance correlations and so on. So we use a combination of models typically that are coming from physics to do the simulation of the real world problems, and the other kind of models that are very often used in control are black box models. I would classify them as, sometimes they are in between, they are grey box models, but typically these are black box models. These are typically used for transient management. This could be transfer function models, and transfer function models can many times be developed directly from data. You don't have to start from physics. It's possible to develop control relevant transfer function models from data. So this is a class of models that we need to use for simulating, for managing transient behavior, or understanding transient behavior, analyzing transient behavior, and so on. So mathematical models, when I say it could be consisting of phenomena that are not necessarily restricted to one domain. As I said, you could be analyzing a system in which you are looking at a circuit behavior as together with heat transfer behavior and so on. So it could be a combination of multidisciplinary model or multidisciplinary domain equations. Okay, so what are the common equation forms that are encountered in the engineering literature? Okay, so one is the linear algebraic equations. Okay, so I am just abstracting the forms. The other set could be a nonlinear set of algebraic equations. Well, we have many times ordinary differential equations with initial value specified, and you want to find out, and some input specified. We want to find out the transient behavior of a system. Many times you get what are called as differential algebraic equations. So it happens many times that you have some dynamics which is very, very fast, some dynamics which is slow, and while dealing with such systems we typically make an assumption that the systems with fast dynamics are at steady state, and the systems or the subsystem with the fast dynamics is at steady state, and the subsystem with slow dynamics is in transient. So this leads to coupled equations, which are differential algebraic equations or DAE equations. Very often, like if you want to analyze a transient behavior of a circuit together with heat dissipation. Heat dissipation is a very slow process, whereas a transient behavior of a circuit would be a very fast process. So with reference to heat dissipation, you could assume that the transient behavior of a circuit is like algebraic equations. You can choose to ignore the dynamics and work with differential algebraic system of equations. So then another class of equations is ordinary differential equations with boundary value specified or boundary value problems, and the last class of problems are partial differential equations. Partial differential equations where there is temporal time variation and spatial variation. So there could be variations along length, or along length and breadth, or along length and breadth, and for example, if I want to understand dynamics of or behavior of temperature inside this room, okay, I might end up writing a set of partial differential equation in which the temperature is varying. Let's assume that it is not varying vertically, but it is varying along length and breadth. So I might write a partial differential equation in which the temperature varies as x and y, okay, and time. It is not time invariant. So the equation that I would get conceptually is variation of a quantity which is in time and space, and I am sure there are what would be analogous situations in your domain? Can you give me some examples? Say transmission lines, do they have models which are partial differential equations? So can some of you give me some examples? X and Y, video signals, yeah. So does that lead to partial differential equations? You can express the behavior, okay. Any other example? Wave propagation, yeah. Time and space, yeah. I mean, how can we forget wave propagation? So solving partial differential equations, well, many times you can, in some simple geometries, you can solve these problems analytically. Probably wave propagation, can you solve analytically? If
yes, by separation of variables.
By
Separation of variables method.
Separation of variables method. But is it always possible, or it is in some complex geometries it becomes difficult? So it depends upon the geometry of the system that you take into consideration. So even if you have linear partial differential equations or linear equations, many times there are situations where, see, for example, I told you this about this example of temperature distribution in this room, that can be solved using famous equation in heat transfer called Laplace equation. So you may have come across Laplace equation. Now see, Laplace equation, if you want to solve it for some idealized problem, some slab of a metal, okay, and boundary conditions are very nicely defined, the geometry is perfect, okay, you can come up with analytical solutions, okay. Now just throw out this nice problem and say, now I want to do it for this room, okay, where people are moving, they are moving objects. Even if you write linear partial differential equations, boundary conditions are uneven. If you just notice this, this side is one kind of board, that side is windows, so the heat going across the windows from that side would be different. There are fans located at different places, so if you start the fans, there will be circulation. So even if your model equations look linear, okay, the boundary conditions can make it very complex to solve analytically. So actually speaking, even though most of the mathematics that we teach is for solving problems analytically, okay, well, I may not be exaggerating if I say that 99% of the problems that you encounter in real life cannot be solved analytically, okay, though 90% of the maths we teach is analytical maths, it doesn't apply to 99% of the problems that you encounter, okay, you don't have nice geometries, you don't have nice, so you have to solve the problems numerically. So these are the sub areas or abstract equation forms, and then if you go and pick up a book on numerical analysis, okay, what you find is that the books will typically start by this classification. They will first say that, okay, we want to solve this problems, linear algebraic equations. First chapter linear algebraic equations, the second chapter is nonlinear algebraic equations, and so on, okay. So what the books would do is, I'm talking about not the books written by mathematicians, which in engineering domain we rarely refer to those books, okay. We refer to books written by say numerical analysis for engineers kind of books, okay. So which are more, so these books, majority of them, not all of them, majority of them tend to classify these problems like this, and then they will list different kinds of methods for solving each type of problem. So there are 10 different methods for studying or solving linear algebraic equations. There are another 15 different methods for integrating ordinary differential equations and so on, okay. Now when I am teaching this course here for last few years, I have taught this for undergraduate and for postgraduate level. Both before I moved to IIT Bombay, I was in IIT Madras for 6 years, and then I moved here. So I have been trying a different method of teaching this course, which is what I want to talk about. So when I teach this course, will not these classifications appear? They will appear, but I defer them to a later point. I don't start with that. I start with something else which I think is the foundation, and then move on to actually the tools, okay. So what happens in this conventional way of doing things is that you first look at some abstract tools, okay. You look at Euler's method, you look at Runge-Kutta method, and so on, okay. And then somewhere in the exercise there are problems which may or may not be connected to the engineering applications, which might be just some x1, x2, x3, x, y, z kind of problems which the student cannot relate to a real world problem, okay. So the initial part of algorithms is abstract, followed by equations which are given as exercise. They themselves could be abstract, they need not come from engineering examples, okay. So whereas what I have been trying to experiment is a slightly different approach. So what I would like to do is to understand the basic steps in formulation of a numerical scheme, and then study the solution techniques. So first I want to form a numerical scheme, first I want to start with a model, form a numerical scheme, and then after forming a numerical scheme, so what do I mean by numerical scheme, okay, I will come to that, and then we will actually go and solve the problem using one of these tools, okay. So what I want to point out here is that these conventionally written books have a certain order and I want to reverse the order, I want to change the order such that it becomes more easy for a student to understand. So the proposed approach is like this. So if you take a look at, if you happen to teach this course and take a look at different tools. In fact, this is what happened when I started. First time I taught this course at IIT Madras, I taught it in the conventional way. I started by classification, algebraic equations, and then nonlinear algebraic equations, then optimization. So I had these 4 or 5 things, and then I went along those. When I started looking at these things, I realized that actually cutting across all the solution techniques, there is one important thing that one has to we have to teach, that is how to transform a problem. Now what is how to transform a problem? If you look at different methods that exist for solving nonlinear algebraic equations, okay, or exist for solving formulating numerical schemes, okay, then you realize that many times the original problem is never solved as it is, okay. For example, I want to solve nonlinear algebraic equations, and do you know Newton's method? Newton-Raphson method. So what is Newton-Raphson method? Can somebody just qualitatively tell me what do you do in Newton-Raphson method? So I have some I want to solve say equations of the type say f1 xy equal to 0, f2 xy equal to 0, okay. Let's put this into a vector form, okay. I want to solve this equation simultaneously, I want to solve 2 nonlinear algebraic equations simultaneously, okay. So let me call this vector as capital F x comma y, okay. This equal to say 0 vector. This is what I want to solve, okay. I do not have an analytical method of solving this kind of a problem, okay. So what do? What we do is that we assume a guess solution, let me call this say x0 y0, okay. We assume a guess solution x0 y0, okay. Then what we do is we use Taylor series approximation, yeah, we use Taylor series approximation. So we say that f x y is equal to f x naught y naught. This is approximately equal to, not exactly equal to, approximately equal to, and then dou f we can write this as a matrix, dou f by dou x, dou f by, also this is dou f1 by dou y, dou f2 by dou x, dou f2 by dou y into delta x delta y. We approximate this equation. Now this is a matrix, this is a 2 cross 2 matrix, and this is evaluated at x naught y naught, okay. This is evaluated at x naught y naught, okay. Let's call this matrix as say J, okay. This matrix I am calling as J matrix, okay. So I have this equation what I do is using this equation. So instead of solving for this equal to 0, I solve for this equal to 0. I solve for this equal to 0. So my problem becomes j times delta x delta y is equal to minus f x naught y naught. Okay, this implies delta x delta y delta x delta y is equal to minus j inverse f x naught y naught. See, f is a vector here, j is the matrix. Okay, so this is the increment that we get, and then we get a new solution, or we get a new guess, which is x1 y1 is equal to x0 y0 plus delta x delta y. Okay, we get a new guess, and then we go back and repeat this. Okay, so what is it that you have done here? You have not actually solved a nonlinear algebraic equation, you have transformed the problem into a linear algebraic equation, set of linear algebraic equations, which we know how to solve very well. Okay, so once we solve the linear algebraic equations, okay, then we use that solution to generate a new guess. Okay, again linearize the system, again solve the problem. So we keep iterating, we keep doing this again and again till we find a solution for the original problem, solving two nonlinear algebraic equations. So this process is repeated till we reach a solution of this equation. Okay, so this is the iterative method, okay, by which, so what I want to point out here now is that what you have done here is that you had an original problem. Okay, you transform the problem into what I would call as a computable form. You cannot solve this directly. This is a computable equation. This is not a computable equation directly. So we convert it into a computable equation. Okay, this computable equation we solve repeatedly. Okay, and well, we hope that the iterations reach the solution of the original problem. Okay, now if you look at how different problems belonging to different categories, ordinary differential equations, partial differential equations, all of them are solved, you realize that actually this is a fundamental step in most of the numerical schemes. You first discretize the problem and convert into a computable form. After you convert into a computable form, okay, then you use some tools that you know, okay, to attack that problem. Okay, you might use that tool repeatedly, like we know how to solve linear algebraic equations. We might repeatedly solve linear algebraic equations and hope that the iteration process converges to the solution of the original problem. Okay, so just see this distinction. This is the original problem, this is the transform problem. Okay, using transform problem we actually solve the original problem, and this is something which is there in the moving on to the slides. So given a mathematical model in any numerical scheme, the first step is to transform it into a computable form okay, using what is called as approximation theory. Okay, so there is a well developed branch of applied mathematics called approximation theory as to how to approximate a problem. Okay, and once you understand how to approximate a problem, then it becomes relevant to use one of the tools that are available for solving the problem. Okay. Now it is quite often that you cannot use only one tool, you may have to use multiple tools, you have to use combination of tools, but so the approach that I use for teaching this numerical analysis is actually first talk about problem discretization in detail. Okay. So this almost takes half a semester. You might wonder that, you know, how long is this, and then remaining half semester I spend on the tools. Now the tools are same, I am not going to invent some new tools, it is only rearranging. And what becomes important here is that first the engineering problems come first and their transformation into computable problem comes first, and then you attack the problem using tools rather than teaching tools first. Okay. So you know, teaching tools first without where they are going to be applied and why they are going to be used many times is out of context. Okay. So, and you know, if you remove the context, okay, then you know, it is very hard to retain the concept. Maybe the students are able to you know, write exams and remember it for the sake of passing the exams, but as a concept whether it retains, whether they can apply it to a real problem, okay, is something that needs to be examined. So there are 5 different tools. If I then when I looked at the course, I realized that are there too many tools? There are not too many tools. There are 4 or 5 different tools by which majority of the problems can be solved. Okay. One major tool is linear algebraic equation solver. The other one is, there are some methods that particularly are meant for solving nonlinear algebraic equations. So algebraic equations, these 2 things that need to be taught. Then another very basic tool is ordinary differential equations with initial value problems. Okay. ODE, IVP, you know, Runge-Kutta, Euler method and all these popular methods we know. Numerical optimization is another very important tool, and another tool that is becoming very important in the recent times, particularly with computations becoming very cheap and fast, are stochastic tools. Okay. So random search based methods. So these are 5 tools, and then to solve any problem you have to use some kind of a combination of these 5 different tools. Okay. So this figure actually will tell you the progression of my course in some sense. Well, here you know, you first define the original problem. Okay. Well, I'll tell you the modules in which my course is divided. Then you talk about how to transform the problem, how a problem is transformed into what is called as a computable form, which can be attacked through the known tools. Okay. And then during the remaining part, so roughly I would say this up to here, it takes me close to half a semester, and then remaining half semester, once you know, what I do at the end of this step is distill out problems that can be attacked through this or through this or through this, any one of the 4 tools, and then I just teach them the tools, the algorithms. Okay. Yeah, please. Yeah.
Maybe neural network.
Yeah.
Whether these are going to be classified into the numerical optimization problems or whether it is stochastic problems?
Both. The many times the see, genetic algorithms would actually belong to the stochastic search methods. Okay. But sometimes, you know, see the well, genetic algorithms would typically classify as stochastic search methods. They are optimization methods. When I say there could be stochastic optimization methods. So stochastic search and deterministic search are two different. So maybe I should say deterministic optimization or deterministic search based methods and stochastic search based methods. So you could solve, for example, if you take a neural network problem, okay, you could solve it using a genetic algorithm, or you could solve it using deterministic, using gradient method, gradient search, and so it depends upon how you approach the parameter estimation problem. Okay, so as far as the tools are concerned, okay, see if you say the neural network. So neural network is a model. Okay, now it will have different facets. For example, one facet of that problem is given data, how to estimate the weights of the neural net. That is model identification problem. So that problem might be solved using optimization, conventional optimization or stochastic optimization. So that is a tool. Okay, so you have to actually define what is the problem associated with neural net. I will come to that. Yeah. Well, that's a good question. So sometimes the classifications becomes little difficult, but tools you can clearly classify. In applications you have to use a mixture of multiple tools. Okay, and then what you get is a numerical solution. Okay, we have to of course emphasize to the students that the numerical solution has errors. The analogy that I like to use here is that of a sensor. See, when you sense some variable, okay, let's say voltage, current, actually what you get finally, the value is an approximation of the truth. It's not the truth. Okay, there are so many things that go in between. Okay, you may have a physical sensor that transforms say voltage or current into some other variable. Then you may have data acquisition system, then you convert into numbers, and at every stage there are approximation involved and or conversions involved, and when there are conversions there are approximations. There could be stray signals picked up. So what you get finally is a contaminated value of the true voltage or the current that you are measuring. You never get the true value. In the same way, when you are solving a problem, which is simulating some mathematical model, let's say I am simulating my power electronic circuit, DC to DC converter, because of levels of approximations involved, okay, the solution that you get is an approximation of the reality, and there are errors involved. The errors could be because of the modeling errors could be because of the tools that you use for solving the set of equations, because when you have a set of say differential and algebraic equations which you have to solve simultaneously, you use numerical methods. When you use numerical methods, they are approximate. When they are approximate, there are errors in approximation. So what you get is a numerical solution which is approximate, and the students have to understand that this is where you will have to apply your understanding of the physics of the problem to say whether the solution makes sense or not. Okay, so what are the overall learning objectives of my course? Okay, so I would like to emphasize bring out clearly what is the role of approximation theory in developing the numerical recipe for solving a engineering problem. So this is what I want to give prime importance over and above the solution. So just going back to, I'll just use this as my I'll just use this as a theme to tell how to do this approximation, that is coming from this equation to this equation, okay, is an important step, and there are different problems in which it is done differently. Okay, so this is emphasized and taught separately in the beginning, okay, for a variety of problems, class of problems. Okay, then the next question comes is how do I solve this j delta x delta y equal to minus fx. Now here, though I have written this as j inverse, Okay. In practice you may not use J inverse, in practice you might use Gaussian elimination. Okay. If the dimension is large, you might use some numerical tool to solve this problem. Okay. So this part is the tools that you apply to solve the problem which is computable. Okay. So what is important to tell is that you have only 5 or 6 tricks in your bag. Okay, there are only 5 or 6 tricks in your bag, and then somehow you have to convert your problem into a form in which these 4 or 5 tricks can be used, either one of them or some combination of them. So this transformation, problem transformation is an important aspect. Okay. The other thing that I want to emphasize in my course is that introduce geometric ideas associated with the development of, there is a lot of geometry involved in formulating the solution techniques. Okay, and this aspect is many times underemphasized in the courses. What is emphasized is the algebra, okay, and procedures, rather than geometry. As I mean, what I mean is visualization. Okay, and it is very, very important to introduce these visualization or geometric concepts so that the students can actually deal with problems more efficiently than just remembering them as procedures. Okay, so and the third thing that I try to emphasize is that how do you analyze the convergence analysis? How do you understand the convergence of a numerical scheme? When will it converge to a solution? Okay, there are different levels here, of course. One level is that when a numerical scheme will converge, when the approximate solution will converge to the true solution, and so on. There are different levels. Okay, but essentially most of the numerical methods involve trial and error. You guess a solution, okay, and solve the problem or transform problem and try to generate another guess if you don't get the solution of the original problem. So you keep guessing till you get a new solution, till you get the solution of the original problem. That is the method, iterative method, which is used. So under what condition it converges is a very, very important. Okay, so first thing that I do is that are there some tools that cut across the different methods that are used for transforming the problems. Okay, what I would like to emphasize is that if you collect all the solution techniques together and try to see which methods have been used for transforming the problem. Okay, one method which is very, very prominently used is Taylor series approximations. Do you use Taylor series approximations? How many of you have been teaching control systems? Only one of you? Signals and systems? So do you need to use any time Taylor series approximations? Yeah? You can say it loudly. What? If there are nonlinear systems, we are using Taylor approximations to locally linearize the system. See an example here. Again, this is a nice example. I had a nonlinear system of equations. I used Taylor series to approximate this and transform the problem. So one of the major tools that is used for transforming the problem is Taylor series. Okay, it's a polynomial approximation. Okay, Taylor series expansion. The other idea which is very, very often used is polynomial interpolation, and the third idea which is used is least squares approximations. So these three ideas, least square approximation, Taylor series expansion and polynomial interpolation, these three ideas are used very, very often to transform the problem into a computable form. So you might use least squares to transform the problem and get a standard form which can be then attacked using or it could be interpolating polynomials, Lagrange polynomials, and so on. Okay, and then once you have transformed the problems, then how do you use these fundamental tools to formulate a solution scheme. So, so now what does my course consist of? It consists of 6 modules. The first module, I spent some time on starting with engineering problems. I start with, so in my domain I start with chemical engineering problems. Probably in your domain you would like to start with some circuit examples, or some power electronic circuits, or well, I don't know much, I cannot tell you what you should start with, you are in better position to do that. So what is important here, what I feel is very, very important here is that we should start with actual engineering problems which the students are expected to solve using these tools right in the beginning of the course. Okay, so and then abstract out a form, okay, saying that, well, this real problem leads to this abstract form. Okay, I will show you from my notes what I have done. Okay, well, it will be little bit difficult to see here with the small font, but and maybe you may not be familiar with the applications, because this first module, which is abstract equation forms in engineering models, is domain dependent, it is not domain independent. It depends upon whether you are from electrical, mechanical, whichever background. But what I want to emphasize here is that, for example, you may have a circuit, I have some units in a chemical plant. I would start with models, mathematical models for these units, and show that actually this particular model will lead to this particular abstract form. I will just show you an example. There is some unit which is see, for example, linear algebraic equations, so I have taken some system which is some separation system which is typical in a chemical plant. What I do is, I write the balance equations, like you may have charge, current balance, Kirchhoff's laws and so on. We have energy and material balance, we also have circuits, and we do balancing of energy and mass. Instead of we do balancing of energy, mass and momentum, force. So 3 things we balance, and then we get set of equations. So if I write these set of equations, for example, the specific equations are not important. What is important is that I get, this is a mathematical model, okay, for this particular set of unit, which for this particular chemical engineering problem. Okay, I get some a simplified model that I get is set of equations, which look like this. Okay, and what is important to show here is to transform this and put it into a standard form. Now if I put this into this form, what do you see here when you go from here to when you go from this equation to this equation? What is the difference? Conceptually, I am not talking about you don't understand the application, of course. Conceptually, what is happening? See, this is some set of equations which are coupled. Okay, here I am trying to tell them that, look, this is nothing but, when you do the course, I am going to call this as Ax equal to b. Okay, see, if you start your course by saying I am going to solve Ax equal to b, no connection with the reality. Okay, and this is where, I mean, this course I have designed, reflecting on what I felt when I was sitting as a student. When I would go to the class on the mathematics, the first thing is written is Ax equal to b. I don't relate it to anything that I know. Okay, so it's important. I mean, I would recommend here book by Gilbert Strang. Okay, a very nice book on linear algebra. Gilbert Strang is professor of mathematics at MIT in US. There are many MITs. I am talking about the MIT. And his book on linear algebra, I would say, is a wonderful book. We should be teaching that book for our engineers. he mixes lot of engineering or real life examples when he teaches linear algebra. He would talk of linear dependence, next he would talk of a circuit, and then he would explain what is linear dependence in context of a circuit, and so on. So you know, it's important to relate to a real engineering problems. This is very important, and if you do this in the beginning of the course, and later if your examples that you give as exercises, okay, they are also from the engineering domain, then the students are actually able to use it very effectively. Otherwise it becomes yet another course in mathematics, in which, you know, this is where as engineers we can bring in the value. See, we are not really inventing a new method, we are just presenting it differently, okay. So it is the way you present it, okay, makes it you know, so this is very important. So in this particular module, well, this is particularly written to tailored to chemical engineers, but I have taken variety of problems and then mapped them. So these problems they have been studying in their courses, okay. Now it's important that you take this problem and then you write the set of models which they are familiar with, and then say that, look, this is nothing but solving nonlinear algebraic equations. You know, I have written this model, forget about this model. What I want to do is to do this abstraction. I want to say that through all this model I map it into an abstraction which is of this form, okay, that is solving nonlinear algebraic equations simultaneously. So this is prelude to this. So if I start my course with these two equations, okay, it does not make sense to the student, okay. It's important that you see this flexibility of doing all this you may not have in a standard core course, but you can do this in an elective course. If you have an elective or if you have a postgraduate course which is taught inside your institute, then you can do all these you know, rearrangements and variations. So in the beginning it's very important that we do all this mapping, and this is you know, by example what I do in the beginning, okay, is come up with I don't want to go through these examples, but at the end of it, you know, I have given examples where differential equations will come, partial differential equations will come and arise when you are solving the models. Simple systems, take very simple systems and show that how these models arise. You know, in the, say you can take an induction motor dynamic model will give rise to differential equations which are nonlinear, and so on. So once you do that, you know, then you can say that, look, I have talked to you about all these examples, and now I am going to concentrate only on these 5 abstract forms, okay. So now on, maybe after, so you could do this very quickly, not the idea is not to teach them modeling, but idea is to, they have been doing modeling in different courses, okay, use those models, okay, very quickly, maybe through slides, and then show them that, look, actually abstraction of what you have done is Ax equal to b, abstraction of this is solving ordinary differential equation, okay. So the map between a real problem and an abstract form has to be created in the beginning, otherwise you are teaching out of context, okay. So this is extremely important to create a context for the entire course, and I think these few lectures that you do in the beginning are very important to contextualize the entire course, okay. Then it is easier, in my opinion, to hold the interest of the students, okay, throughout, because they know why I am going to do this, okay. That is again, maybe this is probably from my personal experience. I used to, when I used to be sitting as a student in the class, first thing I would wonder is why this is being taught, okay. So if I have some idea is that this is actually going to be useful in what I am doing, okay, then it makes sense to study all these things, otherwise, okay. Then what I tell students is that look, now on I will be doing on my board, you know, abstract forms, okay, say I will say x dot is equal to f of x, okay, and I am going to solve that. So where will you come across examples of from your domain? When I formulate the tutorial problems, okay, I make it a point to form the tutorial problems using engineering examples. So you make a mixture, you give half problems which are using XYZ, half problems using current, voltage, you know, magnetic flux. So they can relate, you know, that this is what I studied, this is what it means here, okay. It should come through probably exercises. The tools you cannot, when you are doing tools you cannot write I, V and magnetic flux, there you have to do X, Y, Z, okay. But if you connect in the beginning, okay, what is the context in which you are going to talk about these problems, and through the exercises, through the tutorials, through hands-on programming tutorials, engineering problems, then you know the learning would be much better, because you know they can, it does not take too much effort to fish out these problems. These problems exist in all other courses, books of, you know, other courses in the subject. We just have to pick them and put them in this context and say that, well, solve this problem from signal conditioning here in this context, okay. So then it becomes, okay. So what I don't want to do now is, see, I have this presentation which is quite big, and I don't hope to complete all the slides. I just want to do as much as I can. And so let's take a, before we take a coffee break, do you have any questions that I can answer? I mean, I'll just quickly go through these 6 modules and then we'll look at few of them in the next few. So my first module is this, what are the abstract equation forms that you encounter in engineering problems? That is my first module. My second module is, now you might wonder, is this a course on numerical analysis? Okay, what's happening here? So I'm going to talk about vector spaces, okay. Now again what I realized is that these ideas of vector spaces are very often used in numerical analysis. If the students do not know vector spaces, they do not understand what is happening, okay. Particularly we keep using, now it's easier to talk to faculty from electrical electronics background. We keep using transforms, we keep using orthogonality, Fourier transforms, you know, we left, right, center we use Fourier transforms or orthogonal functions. If you do not introduce why they are called orthogonal, okay, beyond a point it does not make any sense for a student, you know, he has or she has to accept some definitions and then go ahead. So we have to actually introduce concepts of vector spaces. Then I come to this problem discretization using approximation theory, how to transform a problem into a computable form. So this is the next module, okay. Up to this roughly half the semester is spent, and then remaining half semester I teach 3 different modules. One is solving linear algebraic equations, then solving nonlinear algebraic equations. So these are algorithms, okay, and solving ordinary differential equations, initial value problems, okay. Well, roughly this takes me about 48 1-hour lectures. This is what we call as a 4-credit course in IIT Bombay. So there are 4 lectures per week, plus out of which one is a tutorial lecture and one 3-hour lectures. So sometimes particularly for this course I used to teach for 4 hours and then take 2-hour tutorial. So I probably took more than what I was allotted. So this takes about 48 hours of lecturing. But in this way of teaching, the tools come later, okay. The philosophy of what is numerical problem solving, that comes in the beginning, okay. And in my opinion, that helps the student to retain the subject over a longer period of time than just knowing the tools. Nowadays tools are available, okay. You don't have to sit and program Gaussian elimination, MATLAB has all the tools. You should know why and when to use a particular tool, and for that you have to teach the philosophy of the initial background. That is very important. So it's important to restructure this course like this, and then, or if you don't have freedom to do this, at least important to understand the subject like this yourself, then it makes it easier for you to teach. Yeah, so we can take some questions now.
Sir, in our university, Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar,
Yeah.
so we have introduced, earlier actually we were not having tutorial classes, but from this year onwards we have started taking tutorial classes.
Yeah.
So how are you taking tutorial classes here in IIT? I want to know.
So what we do is, I'll show you for a typical, what I do is I upload tutorial problems. I have in the notes that I have distributed, I have given some tutorial sheets that I use. So what we do is that, let's say before every week there is a fixed hour for tutorial, and we have some TAs who, so what we make the TAs do is to, we ask them to solve the problems themselves before they come to the tutorial, okay. And then we have a session with the TAs explaining them the different aspects of the problem. If they haven't understood, we teach the TAs first, okay. And then together with TAs we go to the class, and then typically we go around, what I prefer to do is go around solving problems of, we encourage students to discuss among themselves, okay. So it's not that you passively sit there and solve something. You form groups of your friends, try to discuss the problem, ask each other, because many times we learn by talking to others, that's a very, we should encourage that actually, talking to among themselves, and then ask the TA to go, or ask us to call if you have a problem, okay. And then maybe 1 or 2 problems, we just say that, look, of these 10 problems I have given, these 2 problems are tricky, so start looking at these 2 problems. Don't start from problem number 1, 2, 3, 4, these you will be able to do, and then we try to discuss some important problems we think are tricky problems on the board. After say initial half an hour, maybe you can go and on the board and give some hints and so on. And then after that, what we do is post either the final solution or hints on the, so we have this system called Moodle, which is a freeware, so through Moodle you can post, I mean you may have some different versions of this nowadays. Almost every college has some kind of, or you could do it through Google, you can create a Google page for your course and post the hints, okay. But it's an interactive session, so you don't do anything you don't teach on the board, you try to go and talk to students, try to help them, kind of hand holding whosoever needs. So it's important that you do it like a discussion session rather than, so that's how we handle. The other tutorials I do for this are computing tutorials. I'll discuss them in the afternoon separately, how I do the computing tutorials. I have some different ideas on computing tutorials, because computing is an important part, of this course, numerical analysis. Yeah, any other question? We can of course discuss over the tea, but yeah.
When we transform into a computational form,
Yeah.
when you transform systems or some physical systems, what or intuitive system what you are having in mind, when you take it to the computable form, as you said that you have to use the Taylor series or maybe polynomial approximation or least square method.
Yeah.
But whether all 3 can be applicable to every problem, or it can be only one particular Taylor series or maybe polynomial approximation is going to be the best solution for.
Yeah, so
that
this
problem.
is an excellent question, and what I'll do is I'll try to answer this question in my next lecture. I'll give you a brief background for that right now, just 2 minutes. We'll actually go on this. See, that is another problem that comes a student faces when he or she studies this course on particularly numerical methods. There are so many methods. Okay, so is it that so suppose you say that a problem can be transformed using 3 different approaches. Which one do I use? Okay, so what I have tried to do is to take one example and show that it can be transformed using all 3 methods. You can transform it using Taylor series, you can transform it using interpolation, you can transform it using least squares. Okay, now what happens is, because all the methods that numerical methods that you are using are approximate, okay, you cannot say that method A is far better than method B. Okay, you cannot claim that, well, we cannot classify and say that, well, Euler method can never be used, even though it is most approximate method for integrating differential equations. Somebody will say, well, I will make it work. Okay, and if you understand how to make it work, you can make it work. Okay, and somebody might say, no, Runge-Kutta is better method. You can make Runge-Kutta work. So what we have to tell the students here is that, or even it comes to solving linear algebraic equations, there is no one method. There is Gaussian elimination. There are methods based on iterative search. There are methods based on optimization for solving linear algebraic equations. So which method do I use? Okay, so what we have to tell them is that, ultimately you have to develop your own preferences. You can make any one of them work if you understand the basic principles, how this method has been arrived at, and how to make it work. If you know that, then you can make any one of them work. And deliberately what I have done is taken same example and solved it using 3 different approaches and compared them. Okay, so say that it's not that see, you can make you want to make a dosa, you can make rava dosa, you can make adai, you can make so there are different approaches. Finally, you will get a dosa. Okay, so that's important, that to show that see, one thing which many of the courses or books tend to give is that this is the problem and this is only way of solving this. Actually, the real problems are not like that. There could be multiple ways of solving the same problem, and then the student should know that there is no unique solution. Once you are formulating approximate solutions, there are 2 different ways of getting the approximate solutions, and there are 2 different approximations. Okay, so that they have to appreciate and build in. So I think we'll actually talk about this particular thing next lecture.